My sister smiled as she hugged me at the funeral, her fingers digging just a little too hard into my shoulder, like she was trying to remind me of something I hadn't figured out yet. "We'll get through this together," she whispered, her voice soft, almost trembling, but her eyes were dry. Completely dry. That was the first thing that didn't sit right with me, the first crack in the perfect image she was trying to hold together. Because our dad had just been buried that morning, and I hadn't stopped crying for 3 days straight. But Emily? She looked composed. Too composed. 10 seconds later, she pulled away, gave me that same rehearsed sad smile, and said, "You should go home and rest. I'll handle everything else." Everything else. At the time, I thought she meant paperwork, guests, arrangements. I didn't realize she meant the entire $4.5 million estate. I should have known something was off the moment she insisted on meeting the lawyer alone the next morning. Our father wasn't just wealthy, he was meticulous. Every dollar, every asset, every document had a place. He used to joke that even if he died suddenly, his paperwork would outlive him in perfect condition. And he always told us the same thing growing up: everything I build, I split evenly. Fair is fair. It wasn't just talk. He repeated it so often it became almost a rule of the house. So when I walked into the lawyer's office 2 days after the funeral and saw Emily already sitting there, legs crossed, posture relaxed, I felt a strange knot tighten in my stomach. The lawyer avoided eye contact when I asked the question. "How is the estate divided?" Emily answered before he could. "Dad left everything to me." At first, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it didn't make sense. It sounded like a bad joke, the kind that collapses under its own weight the moment you think about it. "Stop," I said. "Seriously. What does the will actually say?" She slid a document across the table toward me. "Read it." I did. And just like that, my world tilted sideways. Every asset. Every property. Every account. All transferred to Emily Carter. My name appeared exactly once, listed as a witness on a document from years ago, nothing more. Nothing. I looked up at the lawyer, waiting for him to correct it, to explain there had been some mistake, some mix-up, something. But he just adjusted his glasses and said quietly, "This is the most recent will on file." Most recent. That phrase echoed in my head like a warning bell. Because 3 months ago, my dad had shown me a completely different version. I didn't say anything in that office. Not then. I let Emily talk, let her put on her performance, how shocked she was, how she never expected this, how she'd take care of everything. I nodded when I was supposed to nod. I even thanked her when she offered to help me out financially if I needed it. But inside, something cold had already started forming. Because I knew 2 things for certain. My dad would never cut me out. And Emily had been acting strange for weeks before he died. The memory hit me that night while I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the copy of the will. 2 weeks before my dad passed, I had stopped by his house unannounced. Emily's car was parked outside. That wasn't unusual, she visited often, but what was unusual was how quickly she rushed me out. "He's resting," she said, blocking the doorway. "Doctor's orders." I remember hearing something then. A faint clicking sound from inside the house, like a drawer being shut too quickly. I didn't push it at the time. I trusted her. That was my mistake. But Emily had forgotten one small detail. Something she didn't know existed. 6 months before my dad died, there had been a break-in on our street. Nothing major, just a couple of houses getting hit. My dad brushed it off at first, but I insisted we install a security system, cameras, motion sensors, the whole setup. He agreed, mostly to humor me. One of those cameras was placed in the living room, hidden in a smoke detector. Emily never noticed it. And neither did anyone else. I hadn't checked the footage in months. There was no reason to. Until now. My hands were shaking slightly as I logged into the system. The recordings were all there, neatly stored by date. I scrolled back to the week before my dad died. And that's when everything changed. At first, it looked normal. My dad sitting on the couch, watching TV. Emily bringing him tea. Talking. Smiling. Playing the role of the perfect daughter. Then I saw the timestamp. 3 days before his death. Emily entered the room holding a folder. She sat down next to him, too close, her body angled toward him in a way that felt deliberate. Manipulative. I turned up the volume. "Dad," she said softly, "we need to update your will." My stomach dropped. He frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because things have changed," she replied, her voice calm, controlled. "You know I've been the one taking care of you. Handling your appointments. Your medications. Everything." He hesitated. "Your sister." "She's never here," Emily cut in quickly. "You know that." That wasn't true. I had been there every week. But she didn't give him time to argue. "You need to make sure everything is secure," she continued. "What if something happens?" There was a long pause. I leaned closer to the screen, barely breathing. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small bottle. "I talked to your doctor," she said. "He agrees your memory hasn't been great lately." That was a lie. I knew it. My dad was sharp, sharper than both of us combined. But then she twisted the cap open. "I've been helping manage your medication," she added. "Just to make things easier." My dad looked confused. "I don't remember." "It's okay," she said gently, placing a hand on his arm. "That's why I'm here." The way she said it, it wasn't comforting. It was controlling. The footage continued. Over the next hour, she guided him through the document. Not explained, guided. Corrected him when he hesitated. Repeated phrases until he agreed. At one point, she physically moved his hand to the signature line. And then, he signed. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs open. But it didn't stop there. Because the next clip was worse. The following day, Emily returned with the same bottle. This time, my dad looked weaker. Slower. His speech slightly slurred. "What is that?" he asked. "Just something to help you relax," she said. And then she increased the dosage. I didn't need a medical degree to understand what I was watching. She was drugging him. Slowly. Carefully. Enough to confuse him. Enough to control him. But not enough to make it obvious. I kept watching. Day after day, the pattern repeated. More pills. More help. More control. Until finally. The last recording. The night before he died. My dad was barely conscious on the couch. Emily sat beside him, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for something. Then she leaned over, checked his pulse, and whispered, It's done. Done. Not are you okay? Not stay with me. Just, it's done. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt tears hitting my hands. But mixed with the grief was something sharper. Something colder. Rage. The next morning, I didn't call Emily. I didn't confront her. I went straight to a lawyer. And then to the police. At first, they were skeptical. It sounded like a family dispute over inheritance, something they see all the time. But then I showed them the footage. And everything changed. The investigation moved fast after that. Toxicology reports were pulled. Medical records reviewed. The pills Emily had been giving him? Not prescribed. Not approved. A cocktail of sedatives and memory-impairing drugs. It was enough. Enough to prove coercion. Enough to prove manipulation. Enough to challenge the will. But the final twist, the one Emily never saw coming, came from somewhere even she couldn't control. Our father. Because buried deep in his files, hidden in a locked drawer only I knew about, was a second document. A backup will. Dated 1 week before the footage began. Signed. Witnessed. Notarized. And in that document, everything was exactly as he had always promised. Split evenly. When Emily was arrested, she didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just stared at me as they led her away, her expression empty, like she still couldn't believe it had all unraveled. You set me up, she said. I shook my head slowly. No, I replied. You just didn't look up. Because if she had, she would have seen the camera. And now, every time I walk into that living room, I don't see the place where everything was taken from me. I see the place where the truth was waiting. Quietly. Patiently. Recording everything.